welcome to What If I Say Yes. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Lucia. Happy to be here.
Good. I have to tell you that I just finished an interview in Spanish, and then I was preparing for yours. And then I said, no, I'm going to have to change my hairdo and my blouse. So at least the people who I know watch my videos religiously, my mom and dad, at least they don't see me looking the same for two interviews back to back. So I am fresh, I am new, ready to start the conversation with you. So Todd, first tell the audience, who are you?
Who am I? So I'm Todd Jenkins. I grew up in Atlantic City, New Jersey, which is in southern New Jersey. It's a beach town. And I really loved my upgrowing. My parents, my mother's name is Gloria. My father's name is Peter. And they're from down south. My mother grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina, and my father grew up in Tallahassee, Florida. So I'm also a product of them. And I'm also a product of a family of five. I have one brother named Byron and one sister named Tanya. So we grew up with a family of five, and I like to consider myself a fun, loving guy, easy to get along with, and I love to talk. So hopefully you'll see that through this presentation or this discussion.
You said a family of five?
Yes.
So who are the five? You only mentioned you, a sister and a brother?
Right, and my mother and father.
I was like, I'm missing two other siblings.
Yeah, no. So it was always mother, father, and the three of us.
Okay. So now tell the audience, how do we know each other? Right.
Well, I met you, Lucia. You were a neighbor of mine in Jersey City, New Jersey, several years ago. And I'm actually back in Jersey City, New Jersey now. I remember meeting you and your husband, Carlos. We were neighbors on 7th Street in Jersey City. And I actually live maybe 15, 20 minutes from where we first met. Maybe, I guess I would say maybe 12, 15 years ago. So that's how we met in Jersey City.
More,
yeah.
No, I'm trying to, well, we moved, no, maybe. We moved to Jersey City in 2003.
Okay.
But we didn't meet you right away.
Right.
Did we? No. Okay, and then I have to mention that you are married to a lovely woman I also interviewed for my channel, and I want to say the name and the number. Yes. So I interviewed Venaida, and she was my interview number 32.
All right.
You're going to be interview number 42.
Ooh, 42.
That's magical.
What president is that? That's a good president, isn't it?
I don't know. Who's president 42? Number 42?
Yeah, I forget too. That might be a Bush, but I'm not sure. Yeah.
Okay, so yes, but after I spoke with Venaida and about how she remembers we met, I talked to Carlos and I said, well, I kind of remember that we met Todd first and then Venaida came later. But then Venaida said you were already there as a married couple. So do you remember?
Right. So what I remember is the reason I said, what did I say, like 12 to 15? Because Venaida and I are coming up, I believe, on 17 years of marriage. So I know when Venaida and I got married in 2005, that was the first place we lived together as a married couple. So in 2005. And I don't remember when we met exactly, but I kind of figured it might have been, like you said, maybe a year or so after we met. But you said if you moved in 2003 and we were there in 2005. So
okay, so then my memories are all messed up because I don't know why I had you first and then you and Venaida second. But then she was right, you moved there. That was the first place you moved in. Anyway, so yes, you were this lovely couple with a wonderful laughter, both of you. I think Carlos met you first, and it was wonderful. And in the interview with Venaira, we tell the story about when Carlos got tonight. No, I didn't remember the name of that thing, but it had to do with
Vertigo.
losing your balance.
Yes.
So he couldn't wait. He couldn't stand up from the bed, and then I was so scared. I called you. You and
Yes.
Venaira. You were like my 911.
Yes, yes. I remember that. We actually we went to a memorial service yesterday, and because Venaita's mother passed away last November, and there was a gentleman that got up and shared, and he said that he lost his wife recently, and he wanted to go somewhere just to kind of clear his mind, and he got a call from a friend in the hospital, and the guy said, "Can you come visit me?" And he said, "Yes, I will." And he was initially going to go to church to pray, but then he said, "Well, God's going to send me to visit this friend." And I was telling Venaita last night, I remember when you called, we were supposed to be going to Wednesday night Bible study, and the van was coming, and we had to choose between, should we go to Bible study or should we stay and help Lucia and Carlos? And we said, clearly we got to stay and help the Bible. This is more, this is actually, kind of faith in action type of thing. So
Exactly.
I was reminded of that last evening. Yeah. Of that situation.
I didn't know that part.
Yeah. We were calling the van, and the van was actually on its way to come, and we had to say, no, don't come. We were going to help out some friends. So
that's a lovely point, because there is one thing I remember so I used to go to church when I was a kid with my maternal grandmother.
mm-hmm.
But I would go with her because afterwards she would treat us, the grandkid who decided to go with her, she would treat us to a cookie or a milkshake, or so. That was the exciting part. The masses were terrible and boring, and I didn't make sense of it. But I also remember that it was very confusing to me to see some of the people in church who I knew outside church weren't nice human beings, being all these years. So what you say is basically Bible studies had to do with this. Like, you have to be there for each other. You have to be a good human being. That's what it's all about. And so when I remember that contradiction, or that I don't know what the word is, but it was very clear to me how, for me, seeing my grandmother, like, you went to church to kind of get a better sense of how to, outside church, be a better person. And when you didn't do that, it was like, well, then why would you go to church if you're not doing what the gospel says? No.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And that's great, because you always have those turning points or those decisions. I study, I want to live a certain way, but then you get presented with an opportunity to do it. And then do you do it? And do you step forward with it?
Exactly.
So that was great. We were glad to help.
And well, you were so lovely and so nice human beings that we have stayed friends, even though we moved away, and so all these years we're still friends. Carlos and I, with you and Venaira, so that's a blessing for us. So now, Todd, tell us what moment you chose to talk about today. What was the moment in your life when you asked the question, what if I say yes? You said yes and did something.
Right. So the moment that I decided to talk about was in 2018. I was looking for new job opportunities, and a opportunity came across my desk, if you will, that presented an opportunity for me to teach in China. And I had only been to Hong Kong previously, and this was actually in mainland China, which some people say is a whole different world. So that opportunity was presented to me, and I decided to say yes. I want to teach in China, and I want to go. And initially, you're supposed to spend maybe a semester or 4 or 5 weeks in China, and come back home maybe every other semester. But I said yes, and I went on to go teach in China. And
To teach what?
I teach business, finance, investments. I'm in a joint degree program that allows students in New Jersey as well as in China to get 2 finance degrees. So I teach courses like investments, finance, money and banking. And that was my big yes, was really to say, yes, I want to go to this new country and explore and learn and teach. I traveled around the world as a consultant and worked in different countries, but I never really had a chance to teach overseas. And this was an opportunity, and I said yes to it.
I'm assuming you taught in English, or did you have to learn Mandarin?
I taught in English, and I did learn a little Mandarin. I took classes, but it's a long process. So what little bit I learned, I've already forgotten. But that was that was an exciting part. There was other faculty members from around the world. So there was a cohort that we would have classes on weeknights, and then also before I left here in New Jersey, I had some classes as well. But the classes were in English. So
what made you say yes?
I was looking for. Well, one thing is I've always wanted to live overseas. I wanted to live internationally.
Why?
Why? Because I wanted to see what the other countries are like. Other than I read, I hear people tell me about them. So I really like to have a first-hand experience. So I've always wanted to live overseas, and I haven't done that yet. But I saw this teaching opportunity as maybe my longest extended time. Because again, I've been on business trips where I might have been there 1 or 2 weeks. But here I got beyond the 1 or 2 week time frame. So that was really exciting to me and intriguing to me. I wanted to explore a country and learn more about the people, its culture, and see how I would react in the country.
Did you have a cultural shock or not? Like, what was your reaction when you first arrived and when you left? What was your sense of China and the people when you left?
Yeah. Well, speaking of culture shock, and one story I've often heard when I'm driving around or riding around in Lyfts or in Ubers, and I ask people where they're from, and they'll say, they're from different countries, and they say, I came to New York, to JFK, and I was there all by myself, and it was a whole new world. And it always seems so strange to me, like, wow, that must really be powerful. You're there all by yourself. Well, that happened to me in China. My first trip over, somehow the people that were supposed to meet me, they got the schedule mixed up. And I flew in to a city called Changchun, which is 2 hours north of Beijing. And no one was there to meet me. So I'm walking around and I'm asking people, there's supposed to be a sign that says, welcome, Todd Jenkins. And I'm looking, and after about an hour, I said, well, I guess, yes. So
what happened?
So actually my wife, Vanita, happened to call me on my phone. And I had WhatsApp is the big global app that a lot of people use in China. And I was able to take the call, and I said, Vanita, no one's here. And she works at the university that I also work at. So she was able to call my colleagues at the university and say, Todd's at the airport and no one's there. And so they were able to relay a message back to the people in China. And I think probably within another hour, someone came to pick me up.
But what had happened? Like, why wasn't anybody there to pick you up?
It was the scheduling. They thought I was coming in a day later. But I mean, I sent the date. And so that was a big shock to me. That wasn't really, that was just kind of eye-opening, because I'm like, whoa, so much for wanting to go away and learn about a new country. But I would say once I got there, it wasn't so much of a culture shock. It was just, again, learning about the people and how I was received and kind of learning from them. I was in it was kind of like a big campus. So I lived on campus. My classes, I could walk to classes. So it was a very familiar environment. I've been teaching in academia maybe for the last 10 years. So it felt very collegial, and, walking to class was very convenient. So I enjoyed that. And but every day it was just learning about how the students engage with professors, how I engage with them, the administrators, and just kind of seeing on campus how the students, where they ate, how they studied. That was a real, informative time for me, but I wouldn't say it was a culture shock because it was very similar to many of the American universities that I'd worked in.
In terms of how the students relate to a professor at your current university, were there any clear differences when you were in China in terms of how they perceive a professor, or how they behave in a classroom with each other and with a professor? In your experience, was there very, very similar, or was there completely different?
Right. Yeah, I mean, it was somewhat similar. Again, the students that because I was teaching in English, and these students all had English proficiency, but they were varying levels. So, and I was teaching business and technical language. So they were very measured. They would listen and try to make sure they understood me. So I've got a lot of listening. One of the things I would say, one of the big differences is a lot of listening before responding or before asking questions. But this was back in the day where I was actually in person before the COVID-19 pandemic. So I was able to kind of walk around classroom, say hello to the students, and I would call on them. So I was able to kind of use some of the same approaches I've used in the US. But I would say, there really wasn't too much of a difference. Again, just the students trying to make sure they understood me. And again, I think a lot of that was as they were, some of them said I was a fast talker, slow down. And again, they all had their interpreters out on their phones, so they would be able to interpret English, and then kind of respond back to me. So it was just really that. I think the big thing for me was just kind of understanding that, take your time, speak slowly, kind of wait for them to kind of, if they needed to, interpret it and share. So I think, the big thing was really just kind of knowing that even though we're speaking English and, there's going to be some types of delays and, being able to be patient and make sure that everyone kind of understood. And then even like with me, when I would share certain examples, where my samples are relevant to their context in China. So one thing I did learn as I moved forward was try to bring in more stories about Chinese businesses and Chinese leaders. That was very helpful, even though they knew some of the big American companies like Apple and the Apple leaders. It was still helpful. They felt a little bit more comfortable, I felt, when I would bring in a Chinese company and a Chinese leader.
It's interesting because I'm thinking of, so the students you have in the United States have just this one path to you because of the language, because of the place where they live. So it's the same as you. But in China, they had to work harder in terms of, it's not only the content that you're teaching them, it's also the language. And so the brain is working super hard to try to manage all those things in addition to the speaking. So maybe three channels. But also, I didn't think about that you would change the way you teach, because your experiences when I was in 7th Street in Jersey City wouldn't be as relevant as so I went outside and I saw the sign of this huge big company you have here in China. So all these efforts in the brain, all these processes in the brain that have to happen with you as a teacher, as a professor, and with them as students are so interesting.
Yes, yeah, it was. I mean, and one of the things that really struck me was we talked about, did I learn Mandarin? Mm-hmm. I could appreciate when I was trying to study Mandarin, how complex it was. and how much mental energy. I would get very tired and say, oh, I'm tired, or I've got enough. And I could appreciate what they were going through as they were trying to learn the financial terms and understand my pace. So that kept me going as well, because I said, wow, they're learning and I'm learning. So the university that I taught at in China used to be a foreign language university.
Oh.
And so there was several people from all around the world learning different languages. So that was very inspiring as well, because everyone was, learning 2 or 3 different languages. And, they had the French, German, Spanish, and, English. There was so many different languages that were being taught while I was there. So I felt inspired to try to learn a language.
So there were only Chinese students learning all these languages? Or were there international students coming, or was that everything mixed? International students coming to learn Mandarin and Chinese students trying to learn all these other languages?
Yes, it was a big mix. So
your group, your classes were a mix of Chinese and international students?
No. So my classes were entirely Chinese only.
Okay.
Because I had a dedicated joint degree program that taught business and finance. So the students that registered in that were only Chinese. But there were some international students or some graduate students that were in other programs. So my only contact would be with them was like maybe in passing on campus or in the cafeterias and so on.
Had your students gone abroad? Like, had they been out of China?
Some had, but most of them had not. And the way the program worked was they would do 3 years in the United States, and then 1 year in 3 years in China and 1 year in the US. So they were supposed to come after taking my classes in China, then they were expected to come to the US, to our university, and study in the US. So many of them would be their first time coming to the US.
Wow.
Yeah.
What about food?
What was
your experience about the food in China?
Yeah, it was interesting because the university that I was at, it was billed as having all these regional Chinese cuisines, maybe like 12 or 14, but I didn't know any of them. So it took me a while to figure out, all the differences. But there was variety. It was kind of like cafeteria style. Every day there were like 2 or 3 floors you could go in and kind of pick what you wanted. Mm-hmm. So I would say it wasn't like I've kind of got used to like, going to fancy restaurants and having like gourmet meals. It wasn't like the most upscale gourmet cuisine, but because most of the food was new to me, it was good Chinese food. They had some basic core dishes. I learned about like some of their like I would get like the vegetables. First, I started off like trying to play it safe, just getting vegetables and noodles and things that I knew. And then as I got there longer, each day I would try to pick something different. And then depending on who I met, they would say, oh, have you tried this? So it's a process. I think that the food was great. I loved it. And the biggest thing for me was being able to push out and try something different. Other than, maybe broccoli and noodles or vegetables and noodles. I had to kind of push myself to try a different dish. But the longer I stayed there,
what was the weirdest thing that you ate?
Yeah, it's interesting. Wow, the weirdest. Well, this was actually off campus. I went to a city. So one of the things that was beautiful as well was on weekends and after work, I would be able to travel around the city. And so there was one city called Dalian, which is a like a coastal city, kind of like the South Street Seaport in New York, it reminded me of. And I went there, and they were known for their very fresh seafood. And I went with a couple of my Korean colleagues, and we had it was some type of fish, but it was live and it was moving. So you could eat it, and it was kind of still moving. So that was really,
put it in your mouth and it's moving?
Yeah. And but it looked delicious. So that was really
so is it seasoned before you eat it?
Yes, it was kind of like I don't know if it was like a squid or I forget what it was, but it was one of those kind of like octopus or squid, something that it kind of wiggled. And you know, while you're eating it and you put it in your mouth, and eventually it stops. But that was kind of exciting. On campus, um, it really sometimes the breakfast foods. I mean, some of the colors, I think, like sometimes you're used to kind of. They had something called oatmeal, or I think they called it I think it was like an oatmeal, but it was brown. So I mean, like a real dark brown that I'd never seen before. So that was kind of, I think they called it porridge, maybe, but I don't know if I ever tried it. I've always wanted to try it. I don't know if I ever got around to doing it, but I really didn't push out too much on campus. I kind of stayed with the things that I knew. And even sometimes on any given day, if you thought it was going to be a certain way, it didn't always taste the same each day. So so that was kind of my experience.
What about the weather? How was
The
the
weather?
in the
It was
area where
funny.
you were?
Being in New Jersey, they says it's just like New Jersey. So that was great. They're like, oh, the weather here is just like New Jersey. And it was cold. And everyone had on their winter coats. And in the summer it got hot. So that was fine. It was just like New Jersey. It snowed. I believe. I think I was there one time in January in the winter. So yeah, so the weather was fine. There was another story though. I had a chance to hear my wife Benita came to visit me as well. And we went to a place called Harbin, which is another city in China, and it's very close to the Russian border. So it's very north China, very close to Russia. And Harbin is considered like one of the coldest areas in China. And like I believe around January 5th, they have these ice sculptures, and everyone comes to and visit and sees how cold it is and look at the ice sculptures. So Vinay and I went to visit that. So that was supposed to be the coldest area in China. But again, that was very similar to New Jersey. So I had felt useless. I didn't really feel any cold that was, anything that was drastic. But I went there to see because it was billed as being, very cold and very extreme. But it didn't feel like anything I hadn't felt before in New Jersey.
What about religious services? Like you were used to going to mass every Sunday. What did you do in those months that you were living there?
Yeah. Well, actually, I didn't go to church as often, but there was opportunities to frequent church services, and I met a few folks that were on campus. And one time I went to a church service with a young lady I met who was American. She was teaching English in another program, and she invited me to one of her church services. And a lot of those were Americans from Georgia. So I went there a couple of times. And it was near one of my highlights for the weekend was maybe like a 30-minute walk from campus. There was a huge Walmart supercenter. So I could go there to get everything I need. And it was just a nice walk because a lot of people went there and shopped. So it was kind of like a nice outing, but that church was near the Walmart. So it was kind of comfortable for me as well. But yeah, so I kind of, didn't do as much, weekly Sunday church visits, but I did have a chance to experience a couple of different services while I was there.
Now, let me go back to what you teach. Is that what you studied in college? Like, why does that area interest you, and why did that become your profession?
Yes. So finance, that is what I studied in college. In the undergraduate level, I majored in finance. I've always wanted to work in finance. So my background is finance and banking. After college, I went to work for the Federal Reserve Bank in New York, which is this America's central bank. And then I went on to consult with different companies like PricewaterhouseCoopers and Ernst & Young, which are big global accounting and professional service and consulting firms. Then I also worked for Citibank, which is a large global financial institution. So most of my career has been banking and finance and financial services. So once I transitioned out of banking and finance, it was natural for me to continue to teach what I had studied and what I know I had learned about finance. So that's why when I moved into academia, I primarily was teaching in business schools and teaching banking and finance. So it's kind of a continuation of my interest.
And why finance in the first place? What
Yeah.
interested you about that
Yeah. Well, when
when
I
you
was
were
young,
a college student?
yeah, it was really understanding. I mean, part of it was I wanted to know how to make money, how to manage money, how to invest money. So that was always intriguing to me. I always felt like, oh, the more you learn, the better off you can do in life. I kind of felt like, okay, so that was kind of intriguing to me. What is this finance and how do you invest? How do you make returns? So that was always very intriguing to me. And that's why I kind of studied finance. And, the more I study, there's so much more to learn. So it's just really, that was really my interest, just really understanding like, wow, how do you, save this money? How do you invest this money? How do you grow this money? That was something that was really important to me. And, through my college classes, that's the way I was able to get started in it. And then my jobs were able to also give me another appreciation for it.
And your students in China, why were they interested in this area, in
Yeah,
finance and investment?
right.
What
Yeah,
were they planning to do with what they were learning?
yeah. And it was interesting. I mean, because a lot of them, very similar to me, they had an interest in maybe banking. Entrepreneurship is another class I teach. Many of them wanted to be entrepreneurs.
In
Many
China.
of them wanted to, there's also a piece around international trade and what we call like logistics management, so operational management. So many of them wanted to kind of understand, how do you manage a business? How do you manage operations? So those are some of the interests. And another draw to the program is many of the students were interested in coming to America, meaning this was one of the joint degree programs. So they had a finance program, and then we partnered with them. A big part of it was you can study finance in China, then also come to the US and learn more about finance. So that was some of the reasons. But I would say a lot of them really were interested in, maybe small business or entrepreneurship, and also kind of understanding how to manage companies. And some of it could have been from like many of the students talking about their parents had worked in business. So they understood that they wanted to learn more. Some of the students were interested in taking over their parents' companies. So that was some of the draw as well.
How many women did you have in your class?
Yeah, wow. We had a good mix, actually, a good mix. I would say many of my classes were 40 students. And I would say out of the 40, it would probably, I would say maybe a 50-50 split.
Ooh.
Yeah. In this curriculum, yes.
Is that the same proportion you have here in the United States?
No, it's not. It's a little bit higher, I would say, in China, meaning more women
Yes.
than men. Yes.
Why do you think that's the case? That's interesting.
Yeah.
I would have thought that Chinese, they would have been more, let's say, conservative, and less women would have gone to that career. But it's interesting that in China was 50-50 and here is more men than women.
Right. And I'm wondering, I would think some of it too has to do with because again, two parts of the big draw of this program is it's in English. So a lot of the students get a chance to perfect their English. And then also that coming to America piece, or being able to come over to the United States. I think those could be two big draws as well, where in addition to the business piece, because a lot of the students are, they want to perfect their English, because even if they, in China, they've all talked about success, getting ahead, being able to speak English fluently can help them in business. So I think, taking classes in English was a big draw for them. And then also being able to come over to the US could be another draw for them. I think those are some of the factors. And then maybe, like I said, the business piece could have been third. So I think those three factors could also be why there were a good amount of women coming over. Actually, the last cohort of students that came over to the U.S., I think we had like maybe 6 students, and 5 of them were women, and only 1 guy came, or maybe it was 4 and 2. So, yeah.
So now, how many months were you in China then?
So yeah, so it was kind of we do what we call it, we do the academic year, fall semester, spring semester. So I would go over and teach for just 1 month. So 1 month a semester, but I go back to back. So like maybe in a year, I'll be there for like a total of 4 months, and I would do monthly. I would go each semester. Then they also would have like winter and summer, and I would go during the winter and summer.
So how many times have you been there?
Yeah, I've been there maybe like 6 or 7 times.
Wow.
Yeah.
In the period of how many years?
I would say, yeah, so I started in 2018. So that would be what? Within the last 5 years. Actually, I stopped. That's not totally true, because after the pandemic in 2020, we stopped travel. So I would say from 2018 to 2020, within 2 years, I was there maybe like 6 or 7 times. And yeah, so.
Because I originally thought that you had gone several months.
Right.
To stay there to teach like for a full semester, but no, it was 1 month, and then you would come back and.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's what, when I started, and I know I did when I started up saying I wanted to be there longer, it was kind of like, they kind of said initially, you may have to be there longer, because sometimes the schedule changed. So, but initially, like it was a month minimum, and then based on how things went, it may extend or not. But in my cases, it had always been like maybe a month, or sometimes it could be like a month and a half. Because the schedules, sometimes one of the things I found was the schedules could change, because sometimes the Chinese students they were taking Chinese classes as well as these US classes. So if things changed on either side, they would have to adjust, and we would have to adjust as well. So there was sometimes there was flexibility in the schedules.
So now the students that you have taught, have you seen them back in the US when they come, in that year that they come back, or they come to study English and study also finance?
Yes. I don't see them, like once they leave China, I see them at my university, but they're not my students anymore. They're taking other professors' classes.
Okay.
So, but I see them more socially, because part of me is trying to engage them on campus, and I'll take them out, and many of them have gone on to graduate schools in the US. So we stay in touch while they're in the United States, in different parts of the country, studying for graduate school.
Have you written letters of recommendation for them, or not?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a big part of my job. And it is funny, because I tell a story. Initially, I was thinking that most of the students wanted to go to just US universities, but then I started having students asking me to write them for British universities or Australian universities. And I was like thinking, wow, well, if they're not coming to America, maybe, why am I writing recommendations for them? But then I said, well, that's short-sightedness, that anywhere they want to go to study is a good thing. But one of the things I did find in China, particularly at this university, many of the students, the English-speaking countries are vying for many of the Chinese students to attend. So Australia, the UK, the US, even the Philippines is starting to push to get many of the Chinese students to come and study there. So yes, I've written recommendations for many students that many that want to come to the US, and more. Actually, one got into an Australian university. And, yeah, I've never been to Australia, so I was dreaming. I said, oh, well, maybe I can go visit my student one day. But so yeah, but I do write recommendations pretty regularly for my students.
And so why do these other universities, why are they interested in getting more Chinese students?
I think because the country is a big country, and it's a big pool of people. Again, in education, a lot of universities are looking for students, and student enrollments are down a lot in the US and probably around the world. So China, because it's such a big country with many people, it's a great place to pull from for education, as well as many other endeavors as well. So yeah, so that's really why. And again, many of these classes are taught in English. So like the UK, they say you can come here and learn English. You can go to the US, you can go to Australia. So they're all kind of saying, come here. Because before it'd be like, if you just want to perfect your English, you don't have to just go to the Americas or the United States. There's other places as well you can study. So yes, I think the universities is all kind of trying to figure out, how do you strategically get different students from this vast country to, join your ranks.
So now, before we go to the what if I say no moment, overall, what would you say this experience of going to China these 6-7 times gave to you and your life with Benaida?
Yes, yeah. It's enriched my life. It's enriched my life, and it's helped me. It's kind of definitely filled that piece I said earlier about wanting to live overseas. It certainly has helped in that area, because again, the month or two, it's really helped me see that you have to spend time in a country to really get to know it. And there were many times when, I was nervous and anxious and, wondering what's going to happen. And it's nice when you can, get through it. So yes, I would just say it's been a really positive experience. It made me push myself a lot. So it really kind of, made me grow and understand who I was and what kind of person I am. So it really enriched me. And then as it related to my relationship with my wife, Venaida's been able to visit. She came over maybe 2 or 3 times, and we were able to travel the country. We went to Shanghai together. We went to Harbin together. And Shanghai is a great, global city. So we were able to, visit and, have fun there. So it's really been an eye-opening country. And then just as far as, the technology or, the economics, the country is growing, and the innovation that's coming out of China is very eye-opening to me. So it's really been, I think, just a very enriching experience that I'm really looking forward to trying to do more in China, but as well as in other countries. And it's helped me kind of say, well, where do I want to go to live? And how do I pick that place? So China's kind of given me a good entree into kind of thinking about where I want to live for, and when I say live in a country, it's something I think if it's just a year and then I can decide, after that, do I want to come back? But, where do I want to go for a year? It's helped me inform my understanding of what's it like to be out of the country, in a country where it's fairly new to me. I hadn't spent much time there, and like I said, the language is new to me, and the people were new to me. So yeah, it was a great experience to kind of embrace and say, wow, this is refreshing, a very refreshing experience.
And that is why you are announcing today that you and Benaida are moving to Mexico to live next year.
Yes.
After all that. Okay, so let's go quickly to a moment in your life when you decided that saying no was a much better option.
Yeah. And I was thinking about this because I the no that I had to say was is linked to my Chinese story in my travel. So and because traditionally when I travel the world or when I try to be on business trips, I always wanted to be home for like major holidays. I'm very family focused, and I've always wanted to be home for Christmas and the key holidays, Easter. And I decided to say no, that I don't want to come home on Christmas. I wanted to spend Christmas in another country. So a couple of years ago when I was in China, it was my first time being away on Christmas Day. I said no to feeling like I needed to be home, and it's a major holiday, and I wanted to kind of experience something different. And I said no to being home on Christmas Day. And for the first time, I spent Christmas in China. And it was mixed because Venida was not there. And it was somewhat sad for that reason, but she came a week later for New Year's. So that was another opportunity for me to experience New Year's in another country. But that was really, helped me think about some of the traditions I've grown up with and saying, well, I have to be here on a major holiday. I want to be here. And I wanted to say, well, what's it like to be in another country, in another part of the world on one of these holidays that I've grown to love and adore. So that was a great experience for me. There was actually some American community. So we exchanged gifts and, so it felt very, very similar to being at home in the US. And we, like I said, we gift exchange. It wasn't as commercial. There wasn't as much, Christmassy stuff that I saw around town, but I kind of expected that in advance. So, but I would say that was the no, which really just kind of said I wanted to break a tradition that I don't even know how I guess my family values it kind of like I knew that was something that was always important. But at a certain point in my life, I said I wanted to try to do something different and experience a major holiday in another country. So that was my no to, I guess, tradition and feeling like I can't go away on this, major holiday.
Did anybody get mad or offended at you for having made that decision?
No, well, they didn't articulate it. They didn't share it with me. And I think they kind of, a lot of times my family, and I would try to prep them, and I would try to, if I know I'm leaving for Christmas, I would try to make sure Thanksgiving or November, I was around and say, I'm here now. You may not see me. You'll see me in the new year. So I kind of, manage expectations around seeing me. And so I think Venida would say she had a holiday party at home and everyone coming in saying, where's Todd? Where's Todd? That kind of got on her a little bit. But again, like I said, she came a week later and we were able to celebrate the New Year in China. And that was something I've never done before either, which was bringing the New Year in another country. So yeah. So
now, was that the first time that you broke tradition in your life?
I would say no. But I felt like this was the first time that I did it in a fashion that, because I always kind of prided myself, it's a major holiday, I want to, be with my loved ones. And so I think there may have been smaller examples, which aren't even coming to mind right now. But as far as, to me, that was just something that I felt like, because again, the assignment was optional. That's what it was. It was like, do you want to work during this winter session? And part of me is like, I would always say, oh, Christmas, no, I have to be home for that. So I would say, no, it's not the first time, but it just struck me as significant because it was, again, I think maybe feeding towards my wanting to see what's going on in the world. And sometimes, again, when you're just doing the regular season, sometimes I like to see what's happening on the holidays and again, I would say that holiday wasn't as celebrated in some other parts of the world, but again, it kind of gave me a feel for what's it like to be away and could I do it? How'd I felt? And like I said, it was, comforting that, we still were able to exchange gifts. Everyone that knew as American, they were very Merry Christmas, and they were very comforting. They wanted to know. So it was like I almost felt more special because more people were kind of, oh, Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas. I think the administrators at the school had special gifts that were prepared and a holiday card. So it was a special.
So you celebrated inside the university.
Yes.
And outside, were you able to see how people, like regular people in that city, celebrate Christmas?
Not so much. Talking through a lot of the faculty that I worked with, they would commute home. So I would talk to them and tell them. I did exchange. I bought a hat. One of my colleagues, she had a son. I bought a hat and gave it to him for Christmas. It was like an American hat and it had like, I think, a U.S. set up a new U.S. Symbols. So I gave that to her. So they would just tell me what they were doing, but I didn't get a chance to see it real time in China. But a lot of people were just saying we're going to get together with family. I think some people said we do celebrate, some people we don't celebrate. But I didn't feel like I had missed much because what was happening, the campus was a good, I guess, rendition or a good depiction of what was happening outside. Some people did a little bit more than others. Some people didn't do anything.
Very nice.
Yes.
Okay. It's been almost an hour and I need to let you go. Thank you so much for having come to What If I Say Yes. Thank you so much for sharing. It's a very interesting yes.
Thank you.
I've never been to China.
Okay.
I just know my mom went with, I think it was the sister of my maternal grandmother and a half sister many years ago. And it was like a trip my mom will never forget. Oh. It was eye-opening. So yes, but I've never been to that part of the world. So going there for you, having said yes, and traveling there and experiencing this, what you said about the airport and getting there and nobody's there to pick you up and you speak Mandarin.
Yeah, exactly.
That was lovely. So thank you so much for having shared all this. I hope you had fun doing this.
I did. Thank you so much, Lucy. I appreciate it. And one thing I wanted to add was, yes, as I'm thinking about always wanting to live overseas or live internationally, is I want to perfect my Spanish. I'm always thinking about a Spanish-speaking country in which I can live in. So yeah, so that's part of my dream as well. So we'll see.
Maybe not Mexico because it's not very safe these days. But I hear Costa Rica is a good place.
Okay, good.
Have you been to Costa Rica?
No, I haven't. But Vinay and I were in Panama last year, and that was really fun as well. Very welcoming, friendly country. So I think we're getting close to something. But we might try to go back to Panama, I think, in February. We were there last February for Vinay's birthday. So we'll see.
Okay, so maybe in a future interview, we'll do it in Spanish.
Yes, claro.
There you go. So when we do that interview, the brain that's going to be working overtime is going to be yours, not mine, like right now.
Right. Oh, let me tell you this story, a funny story in China, because I had a TV in the room and they would have, so I guess they knew they had a Spanish channel and I think a Russian channel. And I was actually watching the Spanish channel because I think it was like a Chinese, they were teaching you Chinese, but it was in Spanish subtitles. So talk about my brain working, I'm looking at the Spanish subtitles trying to figure out what the Chinese is. And so that was a fun exercise. I mean, it was easy stuff, but it was just like, I'm saying, well, wow, I would have never thought that I was more comfortable. I could read the Spanish subtitles trying to learn about the Chinese. But again, it gave me another feel for my students and again, how that brain, you're kind of working it 3 different ways. And it made me think again about everything, me having empathy and patience with them because there's so much going on. And my Mandarin instructor, she would tell me from time to time, she said, relax, I can see it in your forehead. You're overwhelmed and you're stressed and because you want to get it right and you're like stuck. So I always took that away, understanding that it's a lot on the students, all the things they're trying to assemble in their minds and communicate. So that helped me be a better professor. And I'm always thinking about how can I, make it easier for them to understand the information.
Carlos was just telling me this morning, there's a Mexican student who just came to Ithaca College. He plays tennis. It seems that he's very, very good. And he's very sharp. And they met, I think, yesterday because he's one of his advisees. And so they were talking about this young guy was telling Carlos how sometimes in class right now, because he just arrived, it's very difficult for him to participate and articulate everything he's thinking because it's in English. And that reminded me when I came to the United States, so in 2000, when I moved to New York City, and I would be in these parties or gatherings that my brother Hector and Monique would organize. They would invite me and I would go there. And it was so frustrating at the beginning that by the time I had finally constructed the sentence in English to say something in response to something, to participate in the conversation, it was too late. Like they had gone to another topic, and I was like, oh.
Exactly.
So the beginning is so difficult and so frustrating to first build it here and then just let it out, and correctly, also the pronunciation, and
yes.
A lot of things going on. So good thing that gave you all this empathy, and that also made you a better professor.
Yes. Yeah, it's really eye-opening. I always say it's almost kind of like, if they can do it, I can do it, or we could do it together, because we all were learning. And that's what I really liked about that university, because everybody was trying to learn, particularly just the languages. They all were trying to learn. And then, for me, like teaching in English is like, oh, that was easy for me. But then I was like saying, well, how can I, make it easier for them to kind of understand it? Because
your university, they don't have any relation with universities where they speak Spanish and Spanish-speaking countries?
They do. I think they were just working on one. They just hired someone, a Mexican fellow, that's working on some Mexican connections or partnerships. So I don't know where they stand, because things have kind of been redirected. But that was a focus. They did have a couple, and I know there was just a big Mexican partnership that was on the table. But I'm not sure where that stands now. I think they were, last year, they were going to Peru, and I was trying to get on that trip. But I think things kind of changed. So yeah, but there are a couple of Spanish-speaking partnerships that are around.
I'm telling you, one of these days you're gonna be announcing that you and Benaida are moving to Mexico.
Yeah. Well, Cuernavaca was a great time. I want to get back there. That was a great experience as well. So
there you go. We had our little oh my goodness, see?
Yeah, right.
It's happening exactly what I was sometimes. I don't know if it's because I did an interview in Spanish before you, that my brain is now taking longer in trying to construct the sentences in English. But that was our little contribution. Like when we invited you and Benaida to Cuernavaca for Maya's presentation to society when she was a baby. That was her little contribution into your big project of living abroad and experiencing other cultures. And
yes, it was, yeah. And it's great, because whenever when people say, where have you been, when I mention Cuernavaca, it kind of like sticks out, like people are surprised. Oh, you went there. So it has a little cachet. Then we have great stories to share about our experience there. So I like that one, because it was kind of unexpected trip. Yeah. So great.
There you go. Okay. Full circle.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Todd.
Thank you.
Say hello to Benaida for me.
I will. Likewise to Carlos and Maya.
Thank you. I will. And please send me pictures, images that illustrate this beautiful yes. And I will add them to the video.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. So should I just attach them to an email?
Yes. Please send them to me by email, and then I'll produce the video and I'll send it to you for your approval.
Okay.
And then we'll publish it and let you know when. I publish it every Tuesday if I have several interviews. So one of these Tuesdays, it will be your time to go public in What If I Say Yes YouTube channel.
Yes, very good. Well, looking forward to it. I appreciate the invite and I enjoyed our conversation, Lucia.
Yeah, me too, Todd. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.